Right now from PJ Media, I want to welcome to the program Mr. James Steinbauer. James, good evening, sir.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on the show. We were discussing your article last night on the program. You say that you helped to write some of the rules that you believe the Justice Department violated in Operation Fast and Furious, right?
Absolutely. A few years ago, I was the head drug analyst for the Senate Intelligence Committee, and the chairman and the vice chairman, Dick Joey and Bob Kerry, came to me and said, what can we do to really shut down this cartel activity? And it's funny, I was listening to your show earlier. The concept that I came up with and was passed into law known as the Kingpin Act basically was to bankrupt the cartels by denying them access to the U.S. economy. Basically, once the Treasury Secretary, in consultation with all of the U.S. intelligence and law enforcement entities, determined that someone was a threat to the economy or national security or of the United States, would send that list to the president, and he would designate these people under the Kingpin Act.
Okay.
And it's rather ironic, as you just were saying, that we worked hard to deny them access to the U.S. economy once they were designated, and no U.S. entity could deal with them, and they were not allowed to deal with the U.S. Suddenly, we took the U.S. economy to them by shipping several automatic weapons from the U.S. economy to them, which no normal U.S. citizen could do.
Yeah, and so you say there's a provision within the Kingpin Act for authorized law enforcement and intelligence activities, but there would be a paper trail, right?
Well, absolutely, and authorized only means one thing. Essentially, the concern was we had CIA, DIA, FBI, DEA come to say, hey, look, what if someone from the cartel wants to, come to us and we pay for information, that type of thing, and we take these cartels down? It's like, well, you know what? You can authorize it by going to the Treasury Secretary, Tim Geithner, and he can give you a waiver. It's known as a specific license. I don't want to get too legalistic with listeners, but they can get a waiver, a license, specific license from Treasury, the Treasury Secretary, if requested by the Attorney General, and they have to spell out why they want to do something to violate this act, and they can do these things. But I can tell you, it was basically to pay for information. It would be laughed out of the room if they said they wanted to ship guns that had been denied them in the States to Mexico under a waiver, a specific license. So it's kind of laughable on its face.
Okay, so if they would not have gotten, or it's unlikely they would have gotten authorization. We haven't heard anything that.
Well, the question is, do they request? Because it's kind of it's a catch-22. If the Attorney General had requested a license, then he knew about the operation, and the perjury argument makes sense. If he didn't request the license, he violated the Kingpin Act as well as possibly the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, but we can get into that in a bit. But,
well, yeah, because I'm also interested, how this relates to the story in the New York Times over the weekend about the DEA apparently involved in drug laundering for the cartels as well.
And it would apply exactly the same. I can tell you, with my background, that the DEA or even the ATF would try to say that this falls under the heading of a controlled delivery. I would call it a out-of-control delivery, but a controlled delivery, which means when you're gotten a waiver, a specific license to do these activities, which are prohibited by the Kingpin Act and IEPA, the Emergency Economic Powers Act, you get a license to do a controlled delivery, be it guns or money moving through accounts, that type of thing, but you have eyes on, ears on. The person doing the movement is either an agent or someone, an informant that you have, usually video on, certainly audio on. This is a completely controlled and monitored act. Obviously, what happened here was not a controlled delivery by any means.
Absolutely, and James, I've got to ask you, because this is something that we've all wondered for the months and months that Fast and Furious has been investigated. The way this operation has been described, it's not that there's a flaw. I mean, there's no way this plan could have ever done what supposedly it was supposed to do. We've all seen the news stories, and we've heard the testimony saying that the idea was that you would let these guns go across the border, you would track them Then when when they went to the higher ups in the cartel, you could swoop in, make the arrest of the heads of the snake, and bring down major cartel operatives. But we weren't tracking the guns.
No.
Nobody in Mexico was aware of this law enforcement investigation. So as soon as the guns crossed the border, at that point, really, our work was done. Who would have had to approve an operation like this? And given the fact that we now know apparently within DOJ there was a lot of consternation at the time about a program called Wide Receiver that had let a much smaller number of firearms go across the border into Mexico. Are we really supposed to believe that there wouldn't have been any due diligence at DOJ to ensure that there were no similar operations currently at work?
Well, it's somewhat, I don't want to use the word laughable, but this is why the provisions in IEPA and the Kingpin Act are there. You need to run this up the flagpole, get a specific license from the people that administer the laws that prohibit this, to get everyone's opinion in all the law enforcement as well as the intelligence communities to determine whether you get a waiver to go ahead and try such a thing. This wouldn't have made it past the first meeting for an operation like this. It would have to be requested to do it. A license would have to have been issued, and it would have gone forward with incredible oversight and monitoring because the perceived risk would be greatly outweighed by the perceived benefit, and obviously not the case here.
So what do you make of the idea that all of this then was locally planned, locally implemented, and really Washington had nothing to do with this? Washington never got involved. It was never aware. Anybody at ATF headquarters or at the Department of Justice just completely in the dark that this operation was being planned and executed?
Well, I personally, and just having been in this town for 25 years, in various capacities, I know that it would reach very high levels in Washington, even if it was planned in the field, as the phrase amongst agents and officers is used. Even if it was planned in the field, it would have to improve to the highest levels in Washington. And that is why I was concerned that no one's talking about obvious violations of law, the Kingpin Act. Either they knew and say they didn't, and that is the perjury charge that Congressman Issa and Senator Grassley are currently investigating, or they didn't know, but as I've said before, ignorance of the law is no excuse, particularly by the head law enforcement officer in the country, the Attorney General. He should know these laws. He should know that he has to request a specific license from the Treasury Secretary. The Treasury Secretary should be investigating right now whether or not these statutes that he oversees were violated by the Justice Department. And as I pointed out in my article, my concern is, based on the Treasury statute requirements, if indeed a license was not requested and this activity occurred, it does violate these acts, and this Treasury Secretary must then turn it over to the Justice Department for prosecution. The Justice Department is obviously back to Eric Holder. Therefore, we must have some outside investigator, counsel, prosecutor, be what it is. But in my view, that is necessary at this point.
Later this week, Attorney General Holder is going to be testifying before the House Judiciary Committee. Have you spoken to any congressional staffers to point out your article and the questions that it raises?
I have not directly spoken. I have made sure that former colleagues and associates have made this information known to the relevant staff, but I have not directly done that, no. So I'm very interested to see what questions are asked on these topics to Attorney General Holder, as well as any questions that are presented to Treasury Secretary Geithner when he returns from his European trip, why he may not be looking into the statutes that ATF violated that Treasury Secretary Geithner oversees.
Yeah, that's that's just another interesting aspect of this story. I mean, we now know. I'm trying to rattle off all of the agencies here: ATF, ICE, DEA, FBI, IRS.
And this is not my area of expertise, but it was pointed out by a former colleague that the international trafficking in arms statutes may have been violated. Those are overseen by the Secretary Clinton and at the State Department. So we may have the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Treasury, and the Attorney General of the United States overseeing the Justice Department, all either failing to carry out their due diligence or, quite frankly, being ignorant of the law or, quite frankly, violating major U.S. sanctions against this type of activity. There is no carve-out whatsoever for law enforcement or intelligence activities that are not authorized. And I believe I spelled out how that process to have these things authorized is carried out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. James, listen, it's been a real pleasure talking tonight. I hope that we can do it again. Maybe we can have you on after Thursday's appearance by Attorney General Holder.
I would look forward to that. I'm looking forward to the hearing, and I'd be really happy to speak with you and talk to your viewers again.
Great. Thank you so much, sir. James Steinbauer joining us from PJ Media. And again, James' background, a former Navy intelligence officer and a professional staff member to the Senate Intelligence Committee, as well as a naval attaché, which is where he was involved in writing some of this legislation, including the Kingpin Act.